Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission here is, well, it's pretty simple. We take complex source material, things like foundational documents, expert interviews, and we synthesize them.
Right, into knowledge that's, instantly applicable, something you can actually use.
Exactly. And today we are focusing on something that is, it's really the heart of professional coaching. It's that atmosphere, that relationship that makes transformation even possible.
It really is the foundation.
We are launching a deep dive into core competency number 4, as defined by the International Coaching Federation, Cultivating Trust and Safety.
And this isn't just theory?
No, not at all. It's a measurable skill. It's what really determines the success and the depth of a client's journey.
It's everything.
Our sources today, they give us this remarkable duality. On one hand, we've got the formal text, right? The foundations of trust and safety in coaching, which we're calling source 1.
That gives us the clinical definitions, the 6 behavioral indicators a coach has to show.
And on the other hand, we have an expert interview transcript. This is source 2. It's with an MCC, a mentor coach, and it provides that vital context.
Yeah, the real-world stuff, the history of the competency, and crucially, what separates someone who's just proficient from someone who's, truly masterful.
So the mission for this deep dive is to marry these two perspectives. We're not just going to read you a checklist.
No, we're actively comparing. How does that foundational source define the what, and then how does our expert source explain the why and the how of mastering it?
We'll get into the evolution of the competency, dissect the behaviors you need, and I think this is so important for anyone listening.
For any coach out there, yeah.
We're going to chart that developmental path, moving from, the foundational ACC level all the way to that spontaneous MCC mastery.
It's a great roadmap.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Let's begin right at the fundamental definitions, because the title itself, Cultivating Trust and Safety, it suggests 2 separate things are going on.
It does. They're related but distinct.
So what is that critical distinction between trust and safety? And, how has the emphasis on them shifted over time, according to our expert in source 2?
Well, that historical shift is really the key to understanding where we are now. Source 2 tells us that this competency, it used to have a different name.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was called Establishing Trust and Intimacy. And it was even a different number in the list. The update, the version we have now, is a direct result of lessons learned out in the field.
So they learned that something wasn't quite working with the old definition.
Exactly. There's a much more explicit focus around safety now. The word intimacy, it turned out, was often misinterpreted.
I can imagine. It's a bit of an ambiguous word in a professional context.
It is. It just lacked the precision you need for proper assessment. So the shift to safety gives us much more clarity and variable behaviors to look for.
Okay, so we've moved away from intimacy. Let's really dig into this new term then. What exactly does psychological safety mean in a coaching relationship based on what Source 2 says?
Source 2 gives a definition that is, it's one you should probably write down. Psychological safety is fundamentally about helping the client feel absolutely certain that the atmosphere, the relationship itself, will not have any negative impact on their self-image.
Wow. That is incredibly specific. And it immediately takes this conversation way beyond just, confidentiality.
Oh, completely.
We're talking about the client's internal risk management. The threat isn't that someone will find out their secret. The threat is that the interaction itself could damage them emotionally or psychologically.
Exactly. The expert frames it so well. The environment has to be risk-free for thinking. Risk-free for the client to truly be myself as a client.
So if a client feels that sharing a fear or a belief that maybe goes against the grain or even a perceived failure...
If they think that's going to diminish them in the coach's eyes, or worse, confirm something negative they already think about themselves...
then safety is just gone.
It's gone. And Source 2 points to the absolute non-negotiable component here. The thing that builds this safety is the absence of judgment.
Absence of judgment.
Any sign of it, verbal or nonverbal, is just corrosive to psychological safety. It destroys it.
Okay, so if safety is that guarantee that I can be fully present right now, in this moment, without any personal cost, how does trust fit in? Why do we need both?
Because trust gives us the future dimension. It's the other side of the coin. So while safety is about this present risk-free emotional space,
right now,
trust, as defined in Source 2, is the feeling, the assurance that whatever the coach is going to do in the future,
Mm.
The questions they ask, the challenges they might introduce,
Uh-huh.
they're going to do it for the client's best interest.
That distinction is it's profound and so vital because if a client feels safe but doesn't trust the coach's long-term intention,
They might share things, yeah, but they won't act, they won't commit.
and the other way around, if they trust the coach's intent but don't feel safe in the moment, they'll just hold back all the messy, vulnerable stuff you need for any real reflection.
And that is the brilliant synthesis that Source 2 offers. When you successfully combine that safety, the present, risk-free expression and trust, the future-oriented best interest,
Yeah.
you get what the expert calls the ultimate atmosphere.
The ultimate atmosphere. I like that.
It's this synergistic environment that lets the client truly go inward, to reflect deeply, express raw thoughts, check their own value system, and really think about why they do what they do.
And that's where the real work happens.
The expert says it explicitly. This is the place where the power of coaching lies.
Yeah.
It's the only place where that true, sustained transformation can actually happen.
It changes the whole dynamic. It's not a professional transaction anymore. It's a genuine, fertile partnership.
It has to be.
Source One, in its formal requirements, it really hits on this, saying the coach has to partner with the client to create this environment. But like you're saying, without both pieces, present safety and future trust, that partnership just dissolves.
It does, and it often gets replaced by something superficial, like just giving advice.
Which is the danger.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If the client feels the coach is pushing an agenda, which breaks trust, or reacting badly to something they shared, which breaks safety, they instinctively shift into performance mode.
They start giving the right answers.
The right answers, not the true answers. And the whole process just loses all of its power. It becomes this, analytical external suggestion box, not transformation.
Okay, this breakdown of the core concepts is essential. Now let's get into the practical side of this. Source One gives us 6 specific behavioral indicators.
The checklist.
Checklist. And I think what we need to do is take those definitions from Source One and immediately cross-reference them with Source Two's expert commentary to see what mastery really looks like.
Right, the difference between just, reading the list and actually living it in a session.
This is the heart of the deep dive right here. Synthesizing the formal rule with the experienced interpretation.
Let's get into it.
Let's start with behavioral indicator number 1. This one's about the client's context. Source One's definition is, the coach seeks to understand the client within their context, which may include their identity, environment, experiences, values, and beliefs.
Which sounds, pretty straightforward.
It seems like the absolute minimum requirement for any professional service, really.
It is the minimum, but Source 2 immediately raises the bar. The mentor coach points out that mastering this means you're not just understanding the client's context, the facts about their job or their life. You're going deeper.
Deeper how?
To truly understand the value that the client carries.
Okay, let's unpack that. That's a subtle, but I feel like a really crucial distinction. If I know my client is a top executive, that's their context. What does understanding the value they carry add to that?
It completely shifts the coach's perspective. It moves you from focusing on their external role to their internal driver.
I see.
So if the coach only understands the executive's context, they might suggest things like, maximizing shareholder value or prioritizing efficiency, because that's what that environment seems to demand.
Right, that's what executives do.
But if the coach understands that the client's core value is, say, sustainability, or maybe integrity, or employee well-being, then all those external metrics, they become secondary to that internal driver.
So understanding the value they carry stops the coach from, maybe accidentally, suggesting a solution that violates the client's own personal code.
Precisely. If a client values integrity above everything else, and the coach suggests a solution that, involves navigating some kind of ethical gray area, that coach has failed.
And trust is instantly strained.
Immediately. Source 2 tells us that genuinely acknowledging this value system is what makes every other interaction safe and non-judgmental. It's like saying, I see you, not just your job title.
That makes the Source 2 idea a prerequisite for non-judgment. Okay, let's move to indicator 2. Respect and adaptation. Source 1 says the coach demonstrates respect for the client's identity, perceptions, style, and language, and adapts one's coaching to the client.
And the key word there is adapts.
Right.
Source 2 really emphasizes this. This respect has to be shown no matter what is their background, their style of speaking, their style of thinking. The goal is to actively preserve the identity of the client. This is not passive tolerance. It's active tailoring of your approach.
Can you give us a practical example? How does a coach actively adapt, beyond just being polite?
Absolutely. Okay, so imagine a client who processes the world using very creative metaphorical language. They talk about climbing mountains or navigating choppy seas or being stuck in a dark room.
I've had clients like that.
A coach who fails to adapt might respond with these very analytical, linear questions like, okay, so what are the 3 steps you need to take?
That mismatch would feel really dismissive.
It does. An adapting coach, someone mastering indicator 2, responds in metaphor. They'll say, okay, what resources do you have in your backpack for that mountain climb? Or what kind of light source are you carrying in that dark room? The coach has to shift their style.
To validate the client's unique way of seeing things.
Exactly. You validate it and you utilize it, which reinforces safety and trust.
The client feels seen, not just processed, which ties right into indicator 3, acknowledging uniqueness. Source 1 requires the coach to acknowledge and respect the client's unique talents, insights, and work in the coaching process.
And Source 2 confirms this is about acknowledging specific attributes, certain insights the client has, no matter how simple or obvious they might seem to the coach.
A lot of clients are quick to downplay their own breakthroughs.
They are. They have these profound aha moments and then immediately say, oh, well, anyone could have figured that out.
So the coach's job is to be an active validator, to almost freeze that moment of self-discovery.
Precisely. The master coach pauses and says something like, wait, that insight, you just realized X, that is profound. That is the work.
And by doing that, you're validating their own internal resources.
Yes, and you're confirming that their ability to navigate their own challenge is sufficient. This is a huge trust builder because it puts the expertise back where it belongs, with the client. It stops the coach from slipping into that role of the expert with the right answer.
It's the moment the client thinks, hey, my own way of thinking is valuable. Okay, moving to indicator 4, this is about the relational side of things. Support, empathy, and concern. Source 1 just says the coach shows support, empathy, and concern for the client.
It's simple, but Source 2 reinforces how necessary it is to empathize and show genuine concern for the client and their own context. But, true mastery here means defining concern not as sympathy, but as professional presence.
What's the difference?
In coaching, genuine concern is shown by holding the space for difficult emotions, by validating their experience without trying to immediately fix it.
So if a client is really distressed, a less masterful coach might just jump straight to problem solving?
Because they feel uncomfortable with the emotion, yeah.
And that breaks safety.
Of course it does. The master coach, showing genuine concern, just acknowledges the depth of that feeling. They let it be present in the room. This demonstrates trust because the coach is focused on the client's emotional reality, not on their own comfort level.
And Source 2 identifies this as a huge marker of mastery.
A significant one, yes.
Okay, that brings us to indicator 5, supporting expression. Source 1 says the coach acknowledges and supports the client's expression of feelings, perceptions, concerns, beliefs, and suggestions. This seems like the direct application of that psychological safety idea.
It's the permission slip. The permission slip to be fully human in the session.
I like that.
By actively supporting all expressions, even ones that seem contradictory or confusing or, based on incomplete information, the coach creates a non-reactive space.
It legitimizes everything.
Every internal state. If a client expresses a fear that logically they know is irrational, indicator 5 demands the coach supports the expression of that fear.
Because if the coach were to respond with logic or say something dismissive like, oh, that's not a reasonable concern, they've just imposed judgment.
Absolutely. And what does the client learn?
To filter themselves.
Immediately. They learn to withhold anything the coach might see as irrational or unprofessional. And that withdrawal just kills vulnerability. It stops the reflection and it destroys that risk-free environment. Indicator 5 is like the firewall against intellectual judgment.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Indicator 6, it dramatically shifts the focus back onto the coach's own behavior. Openness and transparency.
This is a big one.
Source 1 says the coach demonstrates openness and transparency as a way to display vulnerability and build trust with the client.
The whole idea of a professional coach showing vulnerability, it can feel like a contradiction.
It can, and this is a critical point of synthesis between our two sources. It really gets to the heart of what partnership means. How so?
Well, if the coach stays completely opaque, a neutral, unreadable mask, they might create safety, but they also create distance. The client might see them as this untouchable expert, not as a partner.
So how does a coach show appropriate openness without making the session all about them?
It's incredibly nuanced. Source 2 emphasizes that this vulnerability is shown through openness and transparency about the coaching process itself and inappropriate moments of just human presence.
Give me an example of that.
So the coach might transparently share an observation, like, I'm noticing a real shift in your energy when you talk about this topic, and I just want to check in on that. Instead of keeping that observation hidden, that builds trust.
I see.
Or they might show appropriate, context-relevant human vulnerability, acknowledging a difficult emotional moment in the room without launching into a story about their own past.
So the vulnerability is actually a modeling tool. The coach is signaling it's safe to be vulnerable here because I'm willing to be appropriately transparent too.
Yes, it levels the playing field, it fulfills that source one requirement for partnership, and it actively builds the trust you need for that deep exploration.
You know, when we compare these 6 checklist items from Source 1 with the mastery requirements from Source 2, it's clear. Cultivating trust and safety is an active, demanding process.
It's constant self-monitoring and deep empathy. It is the absolute antithesis of a passive listening exercise.
So now that we've set the standard for what to do, let's flip it. Let's use the expert analysis in Source 2 to look at the critical failure modes. What are the common behaviors that actively undermine trust and safety?
This is maybe the most practical and sobering part of the analysis. The mentor coach is crystal clear. They identify one singular primary area of failure in this competency,
And that is
the egocentricity of the coach.
egocentricity. That's not a technical coaching term, it's a psychological one. What does that look like in practice beyond just, the coach talking about themselves?
It's an internal orientation. It's when the coach's focus shifts from the client's best interest to the coach's own performance, their own knowledge, or their own need to be right.
So it's the coach feeling like they need to deliver value instead of facilitating it.
That's it exactly. The expert uses a spotlight metaphor. To master this competency, the coach has to fade for the sake of empowering the client. Egocentricity is when the coach moves that spotlight onto themselves. They're seeking validation for their own expertise.
Let's get specific. What are the manifestations of that egocentricity that Source 2 points to? Let's start with judgment and analysis.
Okay, so when a coach shows judgment, and remember, this can be so subtle, a nonverbal cue, a shift in tone, they're imposing their own belief system.
Right.
If a client shares a financial goal that the coach internally thinks is, I don't know, naive or way too ambitious, and the coach's body language shows that skepticism.
They're analyzing the client based on their own value system.
Their own thinking, yeah. And this instantly breaks psychological safety because the client sees the coach as operating from their own subjective rules, not from the objective goal of the client's best interest.
The judgment signals risk. The client immediately thinks, okay, if I keep sharing my real dreams, this coach is going to dismiss me.
Exactly. The analysis has to stay rooted in the client's context and values. That's mastering indicator 1, not the coach's external standards. The minute any external projection comes in, it confirms the coach's ego is in the room.
Okay, the second big failure mode from Source 2 is playing consultant. This seems like a massive trap, especially for coaches who come from a business or a training background.
It's the classic boundary failure.
Yeah.
It happens when a coach tries to convince the client or when they just assume the role of a consultant who thinks they know what's best.
And this directly violates that definition of trust we talked about earlier.
It completely violates it.
Because trust is built on knowing the coach will act for my best interest, which includes prioritizing my discovery process. Consulting signals the opposite.
It signals the coach is prioritizing their own diagnosis, their own solution, over the client's ability to find their own answers. If a coach says, based on what you've said, you should really do strategy X,
Yeah.
they've implicitly told the client, my answer is better than yours.
And that's not for the client's best long-term interest, which is empowerment. It's for the coach's short-term interest of feeling helpful.
You've got it. It's about the power dynamic. It shifts the whole relationship from a partnership to a hierarchy.
And that hierarchy leads right into the third failure mode, arguing versus empowering. The expert talks about asking questions out of making a point or negotiating instead of asking questions that come from curiosity to empowerment.
This is such a fascinating look at the intent behind a question.
Yeah, so what's the difference? What makes a question empowering versus just manipulative?
The intent. A question driven by true curiosity is open-ended. It's
Wow.
non-leading. It genuinely wants to understand the client's internal world better. Like, what's your biggest reservation about that path? An argument-driven question is closed. It's leading. It's designed to corner the client into the coach's conclusion. Something like, but if you say you value efficiency, then why would you waste your time on X?
Right. The second question is basically a challenge. It's designed to push them toward the coach's answer.
Precisely. The moment a client feels they have to defend their perception against the coach,
Yeah.
they're in a debate. They're not in a psychologically safe space. They're arguing. And that's the complete opposite of what's needed for transformation.
So all three of these, judgment, consulting, arguing, they're all just the coach's ego taking over the session.
And they destroy both safety by adding risk and trust by signaling a personal agenda.
The takeaway from this section of Source 2 is pretty stark. If you want to cultivate trust and safety, you have to actively, relentlessly manage your own ego.
True mastery, as the expert says, is when the coach becomes, in a way, invisible.
Which is the perfect segue to talk about the developmental stages. We've defined the ideal state and the failure state. Now let's look at that continuum of growth, using the assessment standards from Source 2.
This is how you, as a listener, can figure out where you are and what mastery really demands.
Before we jump in, for any listener who might be new to these terms, can you just briefly set the stage on the three mastery levels?
Of course. So in the ICF system, we generally look at 3 levels of certification. They represent an increasing integration of the competencies. You've got the ACC, Associate Certified Coach, which is the foundational level.
Showing you know the basic.
Exactly. Then the PCC, Professional Certified Coach, shows advanced competence, consistent execution. And finally, the MCC, the Master Certified Coach, which is the highest level of integrated, spontaneous, and truly transformative practice.
So it's a journey from conscious effort to just integrated being.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, let's start at the beginning. The ACC, the starting level. When it comes to cultivating trust and safety, what do we expect to see at this stage?
At the ACC level, it's all about foundational awareness. Source 2 says the ACC coach knows what they want to do, and they're starting to show some of the behavioral indicators from Source 1. But crucially, the expert says the focus here is often on active avoidance.
Active avoidance, you mean they're consciously focusing on not doing the bad stuff?
Exactly that. The ACC coach is using a lot of cognitive energy to monitor their own behavior. They are consciously trying to avoid to be that consultant or the trainer.
So they're stopping themselves from trying to fill in a deficiency in the client.
Right. They're being very disciplined. They're making sure they see context. They demonstrate respect. They see the boundaries, and they are very intentional about applying that checklist from Source 1. It's effective, it's disciplined, but it takes visible, conscious effort to stop the ego from slipping into those failure modes.
So the ACC coach is building the muscle of self-restraint. What shifts when we move up to the PCC level, the professional certified coach? Source 2 describes this as more of transaction.
Right. So the PCC coach is highly competent. They execute all 6 of those indicators consistently. But that transactional nature implies that the competency is still being performed as a professional duty.
It's not fully natural yet.
Exactly. The expert notes that the PCC coach takes the boxes that I have done it.
Can you give an example of what ticking the boxes looks like in this competency?
Sure. Think about indicator 3, acknowledging uniqueness. A PCC coach might have an internal checklist. Okay, the client just had an insight. Now I must pause and validate that insight.
So they do it perfectly. They meet the standard.
Perfectly. But there might be a slight lag, a conscious choice to perform the action. They're operating in a highly effective, structured, intentional way. It's professional, but the client might, on some level, sense the underlying structure.
The relationship is transactional because the coach is consciously providing a service to meet a standard.
They're fulfilling their commitment, yes. The PCC is masterful at the execution of the indicators, but that execution is still a deliberate performance, not yet an organic response.
The cognitive load is still there.
It hasn't fully integrated into their being yet.
And that leads us to the summit. The MCC, Master Certified Coach, Source 2 calls this the truly transformational stage. How does this competency become transformational and get beyond that transactional nature of the PCC?
At the MCC level, that cognitive effort it disappears entirely. It's not about checking boxes or performing a duty anymore. The application becomes spontaneous and natural.
Wow.
And this is characterized by a really profound level of mindfulness and presence. The coach simply lets the flow going.
That idea of spontaneous flow, it suggests that the 6 behavioral indicators from Source 1 are no longer things the MCC coach does, but things they simply are.
That is the ultimate integration. The MCC coach's respect for the client's values, Their non-judgment, their empathy, their commitment, it's all completely internalized.
So they're not thinking about how they sound or if they're being proficient.
Not at all. They are present solely for the client. The ego has completely and utterly faded into the background.
So that moment of silence, that perfectly timed metaphorical question, it all just arises effortlessly because the MCC coach's only agenda is the client's empowerment.
And that makes the cultivation of trust and safety automatic, seamless. Source 2 suggests this is what allows for the deepest possible client reflection. Since the coach isn't thinking about the process, they can facilitate a truly spontaneous, uninhibited exploration for the client.
And that's why it's labeled transformational. It unlocks the maximum potential.
The full power of coaching that lies in that risk-free, reflective space.
This analysis gives us a phenomenal roadmap for growth. Moving from that conscious effort of the ACC through the professional performance of the PCC to that spontaneous, integrated presence of the MCC.
It's a clear path.
So what does this all mean? We've finished our deep dive into core competency 4. We've synthesized the formal requirements of Source 1 with the deep developmental insights from our expert in Source 2.
And we've established that true cultivation is a dual commitment. You have to ensure safety, that risk-free space for present expression, and you have to guarantee trust, that demonstrable alignment with the client's best future interest.
And we saw how those 6 behavioral indicators provide the scaffolding for this. Everything from respecting the client's inherent value all the way to showing appropriate coach vulnerability.
And we identified the single greatest threat.
The egocentricity of the coach. When the coach's need to analyze or consult or make a point takes over, the primary lesson from Source 2 is that the coach must fade.
The ultimate measure of mastery in this competency is the coach's ability to just disappear from the central focus. The MCC coach achieves a level of natural presence where their expertise becomes a silent, supportive structure, making sure the client's world remains the absolute sole focus.
That idea of self-management is so critical. We've seen that the primary failure mode is egocentricity. That subtle moment the coaches need to lead or fix takes over. As you reflect on your own practice, consist this. Where are you most likely to use a question to make a point, to guide the client to your conclusion, rather than asking a question driven solely by curiosity for empowerment?
That difference right there is the space between the transactional PCC and the transformational MCC. To master partnership, you have to first master self-restraint. That's the real foundation.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the foundations of the coaching relationship. We hope this synthesis helps you cultivate trust and safety in all your interactions.